happy to be here in Vilnius. It's great. Thank you for getting me here, and it's a pleasure to meet you all. And this is my talk, Happy Player and the Philosophy of Dense Fun. It sort of like gives a history of some things that went right in my career, and then starts to talk about things maybe that didn't go so great. So if you don't know, he just kind of said all that stuff. So Commander Keen, Wolfenstein, Doom, Rise of Triad, and Acronox, and recently VR games like Demio and Bait and so on. So yes, I'm a veteran game designer, which means, you know, I'm old and still making games, so 38 years. All right, boom, okay. First off, don't stress. I'm going to mention a lot of resources in this chat, and they're all at my website under resources, ludography. So if you want to look at the games I made or things that I mentioned as tools, just go there. So special well wishes to my Lithuanian game dev friends. I thought it would be nice to wish you all welcome in your own language. So I met this guy passing on the street, and I kind of wrote something he said into my phone. I think it's the right thing. That's welcome? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, anyway, there's some good food downtown, though. I remember that, too. Anyway, so announcement, my next project, specially announced right now, is redacted. I can't talk about it, but it's really cool, and it's good for people, and all game developers can't announce that. So I'm going through some fast, fun facts about myself because I was shy for 21 years, and painfully shy. And then a friend said, you know, I was burying my head after saying something. It's like, why are you doing that? I want to hear what you have to say. And like, no one had said that before. So I became an extrovert, sort of, but I can't talk to people in the checkout line. I get really shy, and that's why I married an extrovert. Anyway, but I'm just going to run through some things that was cool. No one knows what you did unless you actually tell them about it. So this is weird for me as a shy person, but here we go. Okay. Click. There you go. If you don't talk about what you've done, nobody knows what you've done. Believe me, I am not interested in having notions, which is what Irish people call for notions of grandeur. So here it goes quickly. A joke I made started id Software. So we were in the Gamer's Edge office in Shreveport, Louisiana, and we were making like little games a month in a disc called Gamer's Edge. And John Carmack had gotten this sort of tile graphic background to bounce around and this other character to bounce around in front of it. And it was like, wow, that's smooth scrolling. That's so cool. You know, and it's actually working on a tile map. And then I kind of looked over, and we had a Nintendo in the corner, and there was Super Mario 3 on there. And I go like, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we made the first level of Super Mario 3 like tonight? It's like, yeah. So he, like, Carmack isn't like someone that gets excited, and he was like, yeah. So he started coding and making, you know, tile collisions and stuff like that, and I was sitting there copying every single pixel of Super Mario 3's first level into tiles, setting their tile values so he could make them collide and stuff like that, or pop out coins and stuff. And by 3:30 that morning, we had a demo that played the first level of Super Mario 3, and that was kind of fun, right? And it was like, ha ha ha, this is a great joke. So I put it on a disk, put it on Romero's desk, and just said, type Dave 2, because that was his character, Dave, you know, so it was like a surprise for him especially. And so we just crashed, and we got into work late, and we got in there that morning, and all of a sudden, Romero just grabbed us and took us in the thing, closed the door, and says, we are so out of here. I've been playing this all day. It's amazing. Oh my God. So it was like, wow, that's really exciting. So like, well, what do we do with that? And we talked to the company, and they were like, well, we can't really do that because you can't do it on old-fashioned CGA cards, which are like 4 color cards that were out of date by that time. But that was all this company was doing, was supporting old computers. And it's like, oh, bummer. It's like, well, they don't want to publish it. It's just like, you know, I wonder if we could get this demo to like Nintendo or something. And it's like, you know, that was a good idea. And then another person we had hired from a competitor, we had hired John from a competitor off time. and we hired Jay Wilbur, and Jay Wilbur knew somebody who knew somebody at Nintendo. So we actually got them a demo, and they said, okay, this is a really cool demo. Can you get us like a serious demo where it's Mario, coins, the whole shenanigans, and really make, you know, a demo of Super Mario 3 on the PC? And so we made that. It took 2.5 weeks, and we sent it, and it got all the way up to the head table at Nintendo, like where they didn't make the big decisions, and they said, no, we don't want to get in the PC market, because that would just make them go in the PC market, and they, you know, they kind of like the stuff on their own hardware. So it was like, oh, bummer, man. So there we had it, and so it's just like, well, I guess we could make our own game. And meanwhile, Romero had been contacted by Scott Miller at 3D Realms, and it's like, we could make our own game. And I said, I can make up anything you want. And they said, maybe a Kid Saves Galaxy or something. So I went off to my office, and I made up the paragraph you read in the first Commander Keen. So that started id Software. It made $10,000 the first month, and we were like, we can live on that, you know. So that was kind of cool, you know. It's that one moment where I can grab the brass ring. Anyway, I designed the first-person shooter level, because we made kind of 5 first-person shooters while we were there. We started with Hover Tank, and then Catacomb, and then Wolfenstein, and Spear of Destiny, and then Doom. So I got to like make the first level and define the first shooter games, like the first set of weapons you actually use in a game called a first-person shooter, which is a weird thing to be honored to do. That was amazing. It was cool. Anyways, I recently worked for 3 years in VR and AR, but my first VR game was in 1993. Back in that day, someone contacted us and said, hey, I want to make an arcade game doing this virtual reality thing. And they had a headset and a crude thing that you make it with, and they wanted to do Wolfenstein VR. So we did. And it was like this really, like 2 Game Gears on your face. It was like really, really fuzzy and awful. But it was a really early VR game, and it's cool to see like what the future is going to be like. So fuzzy. So that's the ugly thing there. They lowered this kind of bad headset on, and then you controlled a first-person shooter with a joystick. It was the worst thing ever, but I got to rent a cool convertible and visit Tennessee. Anyway, so my game Anachronox, our game won for Best Writing, Use of Humor, and Machinima Award for Best Picture. We put all the cinematics together and made a picture out of it. It was kind of cool. You can actually watch that online. It's a touching story of epic hard sci-fi. Doom could be considered our fifth first-person shooter, as I said. So, one of my Doom levels, Contaminary E2M2. If you like crate maces, this is the one for you. One Best Original Doom level by fans, Rise of the Triad, one Shareware Industry Game of the Year. I was the original designer of Prey. I made the first necessary rocket jump in a game in Doom, and I continued that in Rise of the Triad, and invented the standard galactic alphabet in Commander Keen, and it got into Minecraft, so then it got into a movie. Like, Jack Black is holding my alphabet. That's really cool. Anyway, so Duke Nukem 3D was almost horrible. It was turning out horrible. The game designer was just not making a good game, and at 5 o'clock, everyone stopped playing Duke and started playing Doom. And like, as a Doom killer, that was not a good sign. So I just pulled him in an office and said, George, you have to take this game over. It's really turning out bad. And to his credit, he did, and filled it through full of a lot of crazy movie lines and stuff, and it actually turned out to be a really good game, and that kind of saved the franchise. So it was cool. Hello? Now to the real talk. So that's sort of some context of some things in a career. And now I get to talk about the other things in my career. All right, so my humble goal for this speech is the best speech ever made to change your very life and change or validate your approach to making games. So what we're going to talk about is how to get creative, how to approach to creation, making a focused core, thought leaders and focus on minimalist creation, so people that make like things that have nowhere to hide and are just a concept or a really elegant, simple creation. Then approaching input and output, successes and failures. That's why I told you about successes, so I can now tell you about all my failures, and then an exercise for the reader, so something you can all participate in. So, Getting creative involves input. You have to get input to get creative output. If you don't have like a lot of ideas coming in, you can't connect them, and connecting ideas is what's important. Like Steve Jobs says, creativity is just connecting things, and that's true. So openness to the thought space, you have to allow yourself time for ideas just to kind of tumble around and sort of find their footing and see if they're interesting, and let your brain kind of like tumble other ideas into them. That requires drift time. So drift time is the special times in your life when you are forced to be bored. And boredom is really important as a game designer or as a creator, an artist, musician, because you need your thoughts to drift in sort of a timeless area, kind of a goalless area, and just let them kind of rumble and tumble around so they can tumble into other things, and you can have sort of like, you know, like eureka moments. Also focus. You need to be able to like have flow state when you're designing. You need, like the clock needs to just go away, and you need to be able to think about something deeply for a while. I call it like thinky time. You just need to actually think about something deeply and not worry about the clock and just like think it through. That's really important. Timeless, goalless play. So once you sort of have a kernel of idea, you have to like kind of let it tumble around, and then you have to play with it and see like what potential it has, like explore that kind of train of thought. And then you have beginner's mind, which are you sort of have like, you approach an idea without a sense of preconceived notions or assumptions or rules. And then you have to apply master's mind and actually craft that thing. And that's when you have like a sort of a deadline, or give yourself like the constraint of time. All right, so I was lucky enough to chat with Terry Gilliam, the director, who was in Monty Python and directed Brazil and 12 Monkeys and all those things. And I got to talk to him about the creative process, and I described coming with Anachronox was like little ideas keep coming around and sort of making this sort of paper mache ball, and then once they all kind of like boom, it's like, oh, I understand what this world is, boom, and then everything else is dictation, basically. Like the whole world comes together, you know what it is, and then after that you basically become a shit filter to tell everybody that's working on the project, is this what should go in? Like, hey, that's a cool idea, it doesn't really fit in this world, sorry. That's what you become. So that formation of the total work and the sense of the work, the sort of the gut feeling of the work is really important. Oh, so drift time. So your mind needs to drift around and lazily collect things, and that's super, super important. I just called it that because like there are certain times in the day where you have to have like boredom and lack of, just like your mind isn't thinking about anything, but the problem of the thing you're trying to create is always in the back of your mind. If you watch a speech by John Cleese, he talks about that, where you just kind of nudge your brain against it, and then you go do something else, and then those kind of ideas come and you have to pull them. So as a game dev, this is the most precious resource you have, is having those times that are bored. So these times, mine are basically when I'm going to sleep, when I'm waking up. You're in a hypnagogic state, so your rules are not applying. It's when you're in the shower, when you're in the bathroom, toilet, like Anachronox came to me then, and PAL 18 from there. And then driving, like if you're driving, not an Irish driving, because that's really tense driving, because the roads are so skinny. But any other country, you can drive around and think about stuff. Or you're bored waiting for your food at a fast food place or something. Anytime when you're bored and your mind has nothing to do, that's when ideas start coming in. And always have your phone out or a piece of paper or something to write down those ideas, because they go away in about 30 seconds. And I was like, oh, I'll just remember it when I get out of the shower. No. I actually had a recorder in the shower, and then later I switched to like a wax pencil, and now that was kind of inconvenient. So I just have one of those write in the rain things and a tablet. So it's like, it's simulating me being out in a rainstorm, but I'm actually in the shower, and I just kind of lean out and write stuff down. Voice memo on your phone works too. So the primary enemy of all those great times where you're coming up with ideas, and these are the most precious resource you have that you want to preserve, is your phone. Because your phone is there to make you unbored and full of dopamine and so happy. And I have a problem with this too. Like I have killed probably hundreds of thousands of ideas by not, like just kind of zoning out and reading Instagram or something like that. But if you can let yourself be bored sometimes in the day or go for a drive on purpose, then the ideas will come. So this is young Tom. I'm palming a ball like the basketball players that I used to enjoy watching in Milwaukee. It's a little tiny ring-a-bell basketball. So that little Tom was had a child's mind, a beginner's mind, that I was just making up crazy things. I was toppling dominoes. I was doing magic tricks. I was writing fiction and poetry. I was doing all sorts of like Super 8 films, and I was looking for my medium. And but my folks allowed me that timeless sense of like a place to play. So in this dedicated, distraction-free place, you can allow yourself to play. It's important to have a place that you associate with creativity that's not noisy from something else. And we'll talk about that later. But when you're in this mode, you want to avoid rules, any preconceptions, avoid how you do it. Because like people come up with new things by not like, people just, like Doom, just like, well, what if we didn't have a story in the game? Well, what if we just, put rock music in there? That's what we're listening to, or just, we're listening to metal, making the game. Why don't we just put it in the game? That's like, what's an assumption that you haven't seen before? So one thing about, sort of being creative applies. My mom's advice on finding things is she said, don't assume anything, lift everything. So this is just handy advice in life. If you're trying to find your keys, don't assume like, oh, it's not on the couch. Like, wait, my jacket's on the couch. Let me lift that and see if it's under there. Or just this piece of paper doesn't look like there's anything under it. Lift that. But that's how ideas are found too. So they're hiding under the assumptions you're making. In the beginner's mindset, then when you're in that wonderful childlike thing where, let's just play a game. I got a ball and a stick. I don't know, we'll make up something. That's what you want to be in. Just play. You play around with the idea that seems the most interesting, because you'll have like a few ideas, but this one, the one that just like, kind of like, I wonder if that's something. That's what you want to go after, not something that's safe or, like, oh, this game works because it's like that other game. Like, no, what's this weird game about a turnip? Like maybe I'll do that. Like Terry Kavanaugh just released a game, Egg. It's just about an egg that hops around a mountain. It's like, that's never existed before. I don't know if you like it, but it's new. So you find something different, new, interesting, something that excites you over something that's doable. It may sound impossible to do, but chasing something impossible may lead to something that is doable in a different form. So Rick Rubin, he's a famous producer, Def Jam Records, and produced a whole bunch of albums. He wrote a book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being. And what was interesting about that book is it's the first book I had read about someone talking about the creative process, like actually how you think of ideas, how you toy with them, and how you sort of chase them to the finish line. So I really recommend reading it. But he calls these little nuggets of potential seeds. I call them nuggets of potential. But anyway, or pieces of fun. I actually had a company for a while named Pieces of Fun. But it's a riff, it's a game mechanic, a phrase that is turned really well that could start a poem or a story. So I recommend getting his book. There it is. But if you're stuck, like you can say, I have something that's really cool, or you're staring at a blank page and you know what to do. Well, I got some ways to get out of that. You got writer's block or game dev's block. Here you go. So you start with a self-brainstorm. Just write down everything you actually know about what you want to make, and then kind of stare at it on a page. Just the process of getting it out of you onto a page. It helps if you physically write it. Allows you to sort of see the problem as a whole. And as you're typing or writing things out, you may think of other things like, oh yeah, and by the way, that's probably a good thing for this game mechanic, or I could make a character that does that. And just that process of getting it out and in the physical world helps in self-brainstorming. Poetry method. So I took poetry in college, and the one thing that was really cool is that the teacher said to write all the literal things that your poem is about, all those words, and then write all the words that are sort of about the metaphor or theme you're trying to get across. And then you look at where words are kind of in both places. So I wrote a poem about my grandpa dying, and I wrote down a bunch of hospital terms because he died of cancer in a hospital. And then I wrote down the sort of what the poem was telling about, which was me walking with my grandma on the family farm. But on that family farm are trees, blades of grass, and so on. And I was just like, blades, there's blades in a hospital, and blades, for operations, and then blades of grass, and those kind of words kind of did. And now you can do that the same way with game design. Is like, what are the literal things I'm trying to code in a game or make in a game, so on, and what are the sort of visual themes or ways to represent these. It could be runes or something interesting, but where are those intersections of things? And if you can find the thing that connects those two lists, you can make a really strong kind of mechanic or theme of your game that resonates everywhere, and it's really important. Brute force. Sometimes you just got to do the work. As game devs, everybody knows that brute force is a hard way to go, but you got to do it. So basically, for one game, I was trying to name it, and it was just like, man, what do we call this? We want to say, something that's short, memorable, but so many games have been named, and it's almost impossible now. So I just sat down, and I went through the dictionary, and I wrote down every cool word in the dictionary. That took 2 weeks, and it kind of sucked. But by the end of that, I sort of looked through the list, and there's one of those, no one had made a game named that, and it was really short. And that was Prey. And that was the first version of Prey. So that's how that got named. Because I was like, there's a predator, but there's no prey? Come on, this is amazing. So Prey was different when I started out, but that's a whole different speech. Anyway, so you're stuck. You can just open a random page of a book and point to a sentence, and maybe something in that sentence, a word will inspire you. Same with a dictionary, encyclopedia. I recommend getting Brewer's Phrase and Fable if you're a game designer or just a game developer, because it has every single thing from every single mythology ever done, and every single interesting turn of phrase that kind of mentions some kind of metaphor. So Dharmaka Tanagra would be in here for Star Trek or something, that kind of thing. So that's a really cool thing. And it also introduces you, if you get the physical book, to just perusing a bunch of ideas, and that really can help. Because if you just look it up on the internet, you're going to get what you're searching for, and this kind of lets you see a bunch of ideas that maybe you stumble into something that's interesting. So if you're still stuck, write down your assumptions, literally your assumptions. Don't back up and say I'm assuming in this platformer you walk left and right and you can jump and that kind of thing. And which can you eliminate or change? There are say look at Super Mario Maker. There are rules in there get through the course without jumping. And that's kind of really interesting thing to do when you're used to jumping in a Mario game. But what can you eliminate or what you can change? What could be surprising doing a known thing differently? What would blow the mind of a player? What would surprise you? So I did that for my game Anachronauts. I was like, you know, I'm making this big epic sci-fi game. Why don't I write down like everything I can think of that would just blow my mind? Because, for instance, in our D&D game, Carmack had this, who was a great DM, by the way. Carmack is a great DM. But he introduced this concept of these dwarven heartstones. Like, oh, they're really cool. You know, they're little metal stones they mine or whatever. And it's like, we're like, oh man, there's so much magic in this little tiny stone. And so later, we got the opportunity to, this one person had a sort of a teleporter spell. You can teleport anywhere you can conceive of. And said, we want to go to the biggest dwarven heartstone there is. And we thought like, oh, it'll be one like this big or something. And we teleported there, and the dwarven heartstone was 30 feet tall, 10 meters, like, right? So it's just like, you know, like the most magical thing in the world. Like, how did they get in this cave? I don't know, you know, like that kind of thing. But it was like, just blew our minds. So like, that's what I tried to think of for Anachronauts. And there's been other things like that. Like if you play Limbo and you get scared, first off, you kind of like realize what that kind of thing is. But I don't want to spoil that. If you haven't played Limbo, play it. But what surprised you? So some of those ideas did end up getting into the game. And 2 of them are here. If you haven't played Anachronauts, I'm sorry for spoiling a 24-year-old game. But here they are. Basically, we had implemented a 3D cursor in the game, and I thought, like, one of the themes in my games are, what if that was alive? So in Commander Keen, you don't just get little coins, you don't collect little coins. They're creatures, and they can run away from you, and they can fly in the air, and so they're hard to get to, and so on. So I was like, what if our cursor was a character? And if you see Fatima Dewin over there, she's a character, and she occasionally comes out as a hologram and talks to her. And it's like, there's a long story about she's his ex-secretary. But anyway, that was really cool because then the cursor could like kind of come out and visibly berate the main character and take him down a notch and stuff, which was kind of funny. But weirdly, she kind of looks like Cortana. But anyway, then you're on this planet Democritus, and they have all this wonderful technology, but they never use it because they do everything by committee, and they never like make a real decision like, hey, we should make this technology available to the universe. No, and so you find out. You go on an adventure on their planet, and you really help them out, and you kind of save their planet. And then you go back to the bar, and it's like, oh, how are we going to get into this evil place, and so on. And then the door opens to the bar, and the planet walks in the door. They actually have a miniaturization technology on there that they've never shown anybody. And so a planet joins your party. And that was surprising to me, and it was kind of funny to them, and that's why we kind of won Best Use of Humor and Writing and stuff like that. But that's hilarious to me. It's just like, and then it has like, planetary lasers it attacks with and so on. So it was fun. But that's an assumption, like what would blow my mind? So you're stuck. One of the things people get stuck in is demoitis. That's one thing mentioned in Rick Rubin's book. Demoitis is, I came up with this original idea, or this is the demo for my song that I love, and then you get stuck trying to make that original creation work rather than letting it grow into what it's going to be. And if you're just stuck with the original version, like you're not going to make that crazy cool thing. You have to let works be what they are. They take on a life of their own, and you just follow them to the end. If you talk to a lot of novel authors, they'll just say, like, I just made up the characters and they went and did that. I didn't know they were going to do that. Sorry, and that's how a lot of things work like that when you're making the whole concept. So if you're still stuck, I made 2 tools to help you get unstuck, and they're kind of fun to use. So the first one is Rand Game. So this makes up random game names. So I went, like I talked about brute force before, I went and wrote down every single word that was in all video games that I've ever seen, apart from bespoke ones, and made it make up interesting game names. So I have like what they call in programming, they call productions in language development. And so there's sort of forms like Mad Libs of game names, and then I plug those things in. There's a lot of silly names that come out of it because I didn't put harsh rules on like topics and stuff. So you'll get like Shrieking Ocelots or, Amazing Tennis Story or Pirate To-Do List. But Pirate To-Do List, I won't play that. That's a really interesting game. It was like, okay, well, I got to get some booty here and I have to sail this island and do some pillaging and, that kind of thing. So it can just lead to an interesting idea. And I actually had a game jam, and there was the best game that came out of the game jams was UFO Swamp Odyssey. So your UFO crashes in a swamp and you have to find all the parts to fix it. And it's a beautiful little game in Pico 8. And Game Idea Guru. So I did another brute force thing. I wrote down every single topic or theme, every genre of games, every mechanic I could research for games, every setting I could. I've been like writing down and adding to these lists over years. Every location and setting and plot, which is basically from the book Steal This Plot. So it's sort of like a plot and a spicer. So this can just spur some kind of game idea, and I've run game jams with both of these, and it really it's like, well, I think, in the game jam you can just you have to pick 3 of the things, like 3 of the choices, something like that. And rand game is like you roll 10 times and do one of those things. So those will get you going if the blank page is getting you down. And those are on my itch.io, or I think I point to them on my website. But anyways, just go there, and if you want to see some silly holiday games, if you want to learn about hiding secrets, my games, Who Stole the Coal and Who Took the Books, they're sort of like homages to Atari 2600 or Apple II games, but they're like I tried to hide things in every way I could, like all the ways you hide secrets. So it's kind of interesting. Oh yeah, and then there's Mirror's Edge. So I'm glad they played. I was like, oh no, they're not playing. This is the first speed run game I ever made in Pico 8, and it's a holiday themed game. But so it's like cool, and I thought it was really great. I got 56 seconds in the game, and then an actual speedrunner played it and halved my time. I was just like, how are you getting all those things and getting yeah, that's why they're speedrunners, I guess. Anyways, well, I'm glad they could speedrun and find the different excellent path. But the middle one is what the Who Stole the Coal and Who Took the Books are, and that there's a bunch of secrets in there. And then I just made this silly Santa game called Santa Sack that you have to collect all the cool stuff, and then it gets more and more dangerous as you get on every level. And we can see if you get to level 9. Anyway, so after using those tools and doing your process, collect the seeds and experiment with those seeds. So one of them will show promise, right? So it's like, wow, this is kind of more interesting than the others, right? So you can kind of start to see it. That's why I was talking about that kind of paper mache, kind of like things are starting to form. There's a whole world that finally makes sense, and then the through line is ahead. You can kind of see that the game is fuzzily out there somewhere. I got to work on it. Then you start to craft. You get in the master's mind. That's when you take it from the dreamy childlike state and you say, okay, now let's get serious. Set me a deadline. I'm going to make the design of this thing. So to see crafting from seeds, it's really interesting to watch either of these movies. So Get Back is the documentary on the Beatles, and it's just a masterclass of hey, I kind of got an idea, and just see them work it out. It's the best thing for creatives to watch. Also the movie Once, you can see this couple who were actually in a band together called Swell Season work a song out. And he's just on a guitar, and they're trying things, and she's on the piano, and they're kind of working through, what a creation is. And both of those are really cool. So So crafting a piece of fun is clearest and purest when it's focused down to its core. So you can get an idea for a big game, but the core of what you actually do in the game, your main activity, the core loop, is what's most important. And a lot of people like kind of can get to that too late. So a focused core, is that like a minimum viable product for the? No, it's not that. It's sort of a bare bones, stripped down core fun. Like, is this thing you do actually fun? So an example, it's like the essence of a game, right? There's nowhere to hide. You can fine aim big vectors. So you're actually defining like, what are the tools or mechanic or something I do that's interesting. So you're aiming these sort of big arrows towards what the game's going to be in the future. And it's hard to aim those. You have to like really carefully tinker with them, but aiming those is what saves you a whole lot of time experimenting later. It's like find the core that makes sense. So here's an example you should all know. You all have played this. This exciting game. What is it? What is that game? What Zelda? What? That is Breath of the Wild. So they made this little demo. It says like, oh, I could push this log, like, which essentially would be toppling it over a river. But they're just like, I can push that log into the stream and that would let me get to another place. So that's the barest bones they could get the concept of what you do in Legend of Zelda. And then implemented, you chop this tree and it crosses the cat. And so that's just that idea boiled down to its very, very minimalist core sense. Is this fun? And it was fun, so they made it. And it was really cool. So you're crafting the tiniest seed of your idea to see how it grows, and that leads to the philosophy of dense fun. So you do everything decently. Should I just like put like 50 ideas in my game and to make this big kitchen sink design? Yeah, I can do all these crazy things. Or should you do one thing really well? I advocate for the latter. You can have variations on a core theme. So Super Mario Odyssey, take over enemies and they become tools. That's it. That's the core difference of Super Mario Odyssey, but it's really cool. What tools could those things be? I can crash down walls with my T-Rex Mario. I can become a bird that can stick its beak in a wall and flip myself up. Like that was amazing to like see something happen in the world and then be it. That was a really cool idea in the game. And then so enemies become tools. Super Mario Odyssey is really Kirby. It's kind of the same mechanic. But anyway, yeah, that's another story. But so you could do more is more, like that kitchen sink design, or less is more. Like if you can boil down your thing, even if you're making a big game, that core needs to be fun and defend itself. So you do less is more first, then more can be an informed more, which is really important in creating games. So if you do top-down design, you don't get that. You like, I made my majestic world and I have these NPCs and everything like that. And then you get down to the end and you got troubles. So you want to do bottom-up design. So top-down design, the trees define the local leaves. So you get to the end and you're kind of stuck with all the decisions you've made. And that sucks. So if you do bottom-up design, leaves inform all of the tree. The way you approach a problem is critically important. And if you want to see how you can approach a problem in those big vector decisions, read Understanding Comics. For the longest time, this is the most recommended game design book, even though it's about comics, because it talks about the creative decisions you make in making a work. Do I make this realistic drawing, or do I make this cartoony? Do I just sort of imply detail, or do I really show everything that happens? So it's like a lot of choices in the way to making a piece of work. So this gets back to the gut feeling about the core of the thing. And once you have that gut feeling about what's right and what's wrong, you have to listen to that and craft that focused core. You're starting to make large vector choices, which that book is like the Bible on making large vector choices. So once you get the top-down choices, basically you're just guessing at what the fun of this game is, and you've made all your world decisions, and then you get here, and you're forced to use whatever constraints your entire world is, and these are all unconnected, right? So like, you may have like made a game about, drawing cool runes in the air, but you can't now because your characters are all fish and they don't have arms. So now you can't do that, and you can't like put runes everywhere because like they don't fit in anywhere in your worldscape. So just like now you're constrained by what you can make. It's not infused everywhere. But you do that, it's like, hey, I can draw cool runes in there. I can put runes everywhere in my world, and I can talk in the story about rune making and all the magic history of all that, and it's everywhere. All those green things are informed by this, and that's what's amazing about it. So even if you have a narrative-focused game, sure, make the kind of umbrella of the word, but don't define it deeply. Get your core, and then let that infuse the whole thing before you make that big mistake. So, how to make choices, look at your game through different lenses. This is a great game design book. It's like 100 different ways to look at your game by Jesse Sell. And I recommend that highly. It's really, really interesting and the way to think through the things in your game. So we got timeless play, experimentation, crafting a focused chore, make informed choices, and then you can look at thought leaders in focus and focus creations. These are people that have done this process a bunch of times and what they say about it. So brilliant producer Rick Rubin, he's actually a reducer and boils down his productions by reducing all the overproduction and just boiling down a band or an artist's essence into the recording. Like the Johnny Cash Hurt that he recorded, a Nine Inch Nails song. That was like brilliant, very focused production. And then assumptions challenge the way one does it. So it's basically like what rules can be broken by the crafting thing we're making. He famously lives in a white house with nothing on the walls and no distractions, just kind of like chairs in places. There's one room that's a listening room where he's like crazy $1 million stereo, and but he doesn't fill his life with distraction. He dresses the same every day. So you basically kind of open yourself to like yes and like improv. You're just like, yeah, I like that idea. What if we did this? That kind of thing. And you intend every time you're making something to make the best thing of that possible. Like he was telling Johnny Cash, we're going to make the best record of your career. And Johnny Cash is like, I'm old. No one wants to listen to me. Like, why do you think that? But it's arguably, possibly the best album of his career. So that's kind of a cool philosophy. So Sting, he has a home studio where he composes, reads, sleeps, and spends his focused time. It's like a small house off and away, so he can just like be in that zone and allow himself time to just play with ideas and not think about time. And that's really important. So there is a disgraced writer, which I shall not name, but wisdom can come from poor sources. So I can write anything, I can write or do nothing. I can't do anything else. So you have to sit in that room, and that's all you can do is write or do nothing. And I'm bored, so I might as well write, which is a really cool way to think about it. It's just sort of like you're not forcing yourself to, but you can't do anything else. Anyways, that's his writer shed. And then place of focus, Stephen King. This is the eloquent way to put it. Like your bedroom, your writing room should be private and a place where you go to dream. The space can be humble, and it really needs only one thing, a door you're willing to shut. So you have to go into a place where you're not distracted by a whole bunch of things. All you can do is the thing you're trying to do. And all these people, I kind of tipped it up ahead of time, all these people, Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs, Eric Satie, and Rick Rubin, all have one thing in common. They all dressed the same every day, so that didn't waste their cycles of their brain trying to do thinking like that. It's like, limiting your practical choices frees your creative imagination. So like, not a lot of distractions, and you can just focus on the problem at hand. So those guys, anyway, minimalism from necessity. So 4 people and others later, making games means we just had raw cool in our games. We didn't, we were a small team, so we could just this is the core of what this kind of cool game would be, right? And I like to put in there like a job, so that's your core loop, and a hobby, so it's the 10% thing, like your talent or your skill or finding secrets in Wolfenstein and Doom, that kind of thing. So you have something to distract you from the monotony of the job of the core loop. We did games in a month. That's how we started. Soft Disk, where we started, was like the McDonald's of gaming. It was like, so, you get paid no money, but you're learning your craft, right? And so we made games, and when we left, we agreed to keep making games while they were doing that, finding other people to make them. So we were making our games and Gamer's Edge games for a year. So we made 13 games in 1 year. And that was crazy, but we actually got them all done, and they were all pretty decent games. Also, Wolfenstein 3D. Originally, we made it more complex, like, the second Castle Wolfenstein game on the Apple II, like you're dragging corpses and wearing uniforms and stuff. And that wound up being kind of fussy and not brutal like the engine we had just made. So just like, let's just do, run and gun. We'll add some secrets, but other than that, it's just, basic, brutal gameplay. And the same thing with Doom. Originally, Carmack was adamant on making this one big open world that was seamless walking between it, and this big space base and stuff. And I was like, that's not the thing to innovate right now. Like, people love, the satisfaction of finishing a level, and it's, like a thing you can accomplish. And I wound up doing a month of design on the thing that I didn't believe in, but then we went back to level, which made tons of sense. Anyways, focus core doesn't mean all the way to minimalism, but studying other minimalist works lets you see something boiled down to its essence. There's nowhere to hide, so it's just like, this better be cool, because that's all it is. So here's a whole bunch of minimalist music. Usually it's like a cappella music or musicians that just use a few instruments, like Violent Femmes or something. Johnny Cash's Hurt, very stripped down production. John Cage is the ultimate minimalist work, which is just him sitting in a piano playing nothing for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. But anyways, there's lots of very simple productions here. Mining for Gold Cowboy Junkies is a cappella in like a big echoey church. It's really cool. And there's minimalist art, Mondrian. If you've never seen a Rothko in person, it's kind of trippy because you think like, oh, I could paint that. But you stare at it for a while and your mind starts almost hallucinating and seeing depth and interest in the painting. So they're kind of really cool to look at. That's the reason John Lennon and Yoko Ono got married, is she did artwork called ceiling painting. And you go up this ladder and you look through a magnifying glass to a canvas suspended above the ladder. And through the magnifying glass, you just see the word yes. And that was positive. And if that had said no, John Lennon, he said he would have left. It's like art had never spoken to me. And if it said something depressing, I'm not going to deal with it. But it said yes, it was positive. Like, I kind of dig that. And, they got married. And then Duchamp's sort of urinal, presented as art. But, that gets you thinking, like, why is he presenting this as art? Is it supposed to be like the guy made it and signed it? He's really thinking that? Or commenting on the art world, and so your mind just starts reeling. And just from the presenting of a simple object and juxtaposing it with, like, this is my work, that kind of thing. It's really interesting. So, Fair Dog Games. I mean, you should know all these. You're at a game conference. But Tetris, Minute, Baba Is You, most Pico 8 games. There's like Tetris. Carmack said this could have been done on like an early computer or Atari 2600. It's a simple, elegant concept that could have been in way before it came out. which is amazing. But you should know most of those. Stripping down your game to minimalist graphics. So I made it, and it's not appearing on here. So anyway, if you go to my itch.io, this game is there. It looks like an old Atari 2600 game, but it's stripped down to very simple mechanics of just trying to get to a white dot and avoid orange dots. And that's really simple, but it's weird because if you fail, you go back a level, and if you succeed, you go forward a level. So you wind up getting this kind of weird slot machine addiction, like, can I get one more? Can I get one more? And it's so simple, but it taught me a lot about, like, hey, you know, I can affect how the player feels by sort of giving and taking away. So you ponder the minimalist choices of, say, a Game Boy. Why did they make it look crappy? It has, you know, 4 shades of gray, and it's built like a tank. And it's like, well, why did they make those design choices? It's like, did they just want to make a Tetris machine? Or did they value battery life, which Nintendo seems to do? Nintendo makes a lot of great battery life for some reason, but it's the choices of their hardware that they do so. And they built it like a tank because they knew kids are going to be playing and dumping it. And they didn't want to add a backlight because that ruins battery lifetime. It's like, how long can I play this thing? Minimalist photography. So Avedon like just brings a white background and shoots people in front of it, but then you just get to really study what those people are like, and the art is who he chooses to photograph and the moment of them presenting themselves. So minimalist design, not always great. Steve Jobs wanted to put a single button mouse on the first Mac when everybody was using 2-button mice. That was stupid, and he wound up like pressing 4 or 5 keys just to do special hotkey things, and it was dumb. Also, like having a mouse that you can actually plug in from the bottom and charge instead of being able to use it, ridiculous. Joni Ive, useful ports. He like took all your ports away. Like, I want to project this speech on a HDMI cable, and now I have to, you know, I have a dongle. That's stupid. And taking out the audio jack was the first really user hostile thing that they actually made from Apple. That was too bad. But they wanted to sell AirPods. Anyway, so you need creative input to synthesize and make new connections. So, you know, he said creativity is just connecting things, right? So that's what you just need to fill yourself with: movies and art and games and books and articles, and have life experiences. Like, have a rich life, and you'll have more like fodder to be creative from. So the beginner's mind is sort of play, you know, you're having fun with it. And the master's mind is study and craft. So input and output. Examples of that: Commander Keen, what were its influences? Mario, Sonic, Chuck Jones cartoons. A story called Available Data, the Warp Reaction, which is about a kid who has a backyard clubhouse, and there's a junkyard behind it, and he brings pieces of junk together, and then he brings them all out, assembles them, climbs on top of it, and the kid doesn't speak, but he climbs into it, and all of a sudden it lifts off the ground glowing and lowers back down, and then he puts all the stuff back in the junkyard. So just like this, you know, super intelligent person that doesn't talk, you know, making some interesting thing in his backyard clubhouse, which is sort of where it came from Commander Keen. Wolfenstein, the original Apple II Castle Wolfenstein, of course, all the lessons we got from our previous FPSs and a lot of action adventure games. Also, Doom, D&D campaign. Basically, Romero made up a spell called, well, I excuse my language, Ball Crusher. So it was like a Ball Crusher spell. And there was this magician that was like gating in demons in the D&D campaign. And some demons promised his character, hey, we'll give you cool weapons and armor if you just kind of get us that Demonicron book that controls us. And so he did his spell, and it worked. The guy lost a savings throw. John's character pushed the book to the demons, and then he enjoyed his weapons for like a day. And then millions of demons started flooding out into the world, and that ended our whole player campaign. So after that, we kind of made this game called Doom. And of course, Aliens, you know, the really exciting, you know, fighting and guns and stuff like that. And Evil Dead 2, of course, for the chainsaw. which I still have in my office. Rise of the Triad, Magic Bats fighting against demons, God Mode, and Wolfenstein 3D, because we would no clip and walk through the walls and go, ooh, and it's like, hey, that would be kind of a fun mode. What if God Mode was literally God Mode and you turn into a god and smite people? I thought that would be fun. And then Anime Weapons, one of the programmers just loved, Fist of the North Star and JoJo's. And then so we just kind of implemented those. It was fun. Anachronox, scientist articles on expanding, collapsing universes. Chrono Trigger, obviously, it was sort of an American take on a JRPG, and the kind of sense of humor of Hitchhiker's Guide infused it. So that's why we won Best Writing and Best Humor. So Bob Dylan. So if you want to make the music like me, don't study me, study who I listen to. So those are my influences. Think about your influences and how that influences what games you want to make. Childhood was filled with humor. We were always trying to make the best joke. That was like our family competition. A love of words. My mom made me look up everything in the dictionary, and I love her for it. But importantly, a game closet where lots of 3D games and puzzles and everything. So I was constantly kind of thinking in sort of a game design world with that magical closet. And then science and words. My dad was a mechanical engineer and my mom was a journalist. So like I kind of got both hemispheres of my brain, so it kind of made my brain connect together really well. I don't think forward, like I need help going around. My wife helps me walk around the building and stuff like that. But I can think of cool ideas because of that nurturing environment they gave me. And that's really important, your environment. If there's a safe place for you to have creative ideas and people aren't negative about those ideas, that's really important. Like it's a place that you can safely play and think. Time to play. And they gave me kudos. Like we got an Apple II in 1980, and I made like little dumb demos. But every one that I made, they said, that's really good. It's amazing. Even when I made Super 8 films and stories and stuff like that, there's always positive about that. And it just gave me a sense of like, yeah, like I can do this, And I think that's important. People don't hear that. Like if you just say like, oh, why are you doing that? Like, let's study to be, a doctor or something like that. Then that crushes that creative spirit in you. And that ruins kind of like the whole, like you're talking about big vector decision, that ruins the whole trajectory of your whole life. Like you could have been that creative person and then you were squelched because negative people are surrounding you. So surround yourself with positive folks. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Anyway, so make sure your output is something new because like everybody's like, I'm going to make my own WoW. It's like you're already starting with like somebody else's game. That's not cool. Make new game devs. You make a bunch of simple bad games. If you read Robert Rodriguez's book, Rebel Without a Crew, he says make 10 bad films. Don't show them to anybody. Just learn your craft. So like copy Galaga, copy Pac-Man, finish them. Just finishing a game is amazing. Like you'll feel so good about it. Scope it down. Like make it the simplest game you can possibly make. Then learn your craft. And it's like I can make games now and then start getting creative. There's his book. I actually got a picture with him. See, he's making like actual East Side Hispanic gang signs, and I'm just putting fingers up there like I'm cool, and I had Klingon hair. But anyway, that's a really great book to read about the sort of the creative struggle, like fighting. Like he went into a medical experiment and had his arm punched open and drugs put in there, and they put a Band-Aid on it and go like, I don't know, see if you get sick. But he got $5,000 for that, and he made his first film, El Mariachi. So, work for it. Work for what you do, what you must do. So now we get to talk about successes and failures at Acronox. So we got awards for best humor, writing, RPG of the show, machinima. But guess what I did? I did a top-down design. So I love this world. This is an amazing world. I love it. I know it's going to work out, and I got the whole story. But that meant the battle systems weren't really like integrated and infused. I like the battle, but it's just sort of like Chrono Trigger plus, really. And it wasn't deeply woven in. So like, things were just put around and stuff. It's over ambitious. We shipped with a few bugs. and kind of half the story, because like, oh, I made of this amazing thing. Maybe sometime soon, I will get the rest of the story out. Rise of the Triad, it was really cool, crazy, fun. A lot of people, like grew up playing it. It's cool, but it invented jump pads, and Quake 3 used those. But it was kitchen sink design. It was kind of like, and that's kind of because it was Wolfenstein Part 2. So it's just like, what can we do with what we've already made, right? And so it kind of suffered from the ghosts of that. And then Tinyverse, it was actually really cool. Basically, you have games in VR, and these are little social spaces to hang out before and after matches in those games. So you can play Demio for a few hours and then hang out and talk about, our strategies could have been better, or just hang out as friends, play archery or a video game or whatever, in those things, or paint miniatures, something related to the game, which is really cool. And all of those are really neat, like they're all themed to the experience, and and you're already with people that have shared that experience, and you have things to talk about, which is kind of cool. The failure, though, is that the big idea was then we connect all these little Tinyverse social spaces into one, so you could journey between them and kind of like visit other games and other game players and sort of like make this sort of meta questing and stuff. We didn't get to that because VR kind of had a heart attack a couple of years ago, but it's a really cool idea. And then basically Nelson said this: I either win or I learn, and that's a great way to think about it. Yes, it's painful. Like Stephen Colbert says, learn to love the bomb. It's like, I'm just learning that I can take it and what works and what doesn't. So it's like, this is a gift, now I can use this next time. So here's your exercise. Make sure you have a place to focus, give yourself time to play, noodle around with a paper design, download Pico 8, which is a little fantasy console. You program in Lua, and it's really easy to use. If you can't draw or you can't make music or sound effects, I have a game jam that I'm starting at the middle of December called Toy Box Jam. And I give you all the sounds, all the graphics, all the music, and you just have to make a game with them. So if you need a place to start and you can only code, use those. And you can code in any engine. I could provide waves instead of assets for Pico 8. And here's one of the games that was made in a Rand game jam, UFO Swamp Odyssey. It's actually really hilarious, fun game to play. Anyways, download it, collect your seeds, experiment with them, craft them, and just make fun in a very simple sense. It could be on paper, but Pico 8's really fun if you can get some people together and do it. So you ingest your ideas incessantly. Give yourself time to play with them. Don't put any pressure on yourself, just play. Craft a focus core to inform the whole, because when I didn't do that, my game designs did not turn out as well. And then go make dense fun.
Thank you. What is your condensed opinion about two things? Games in VR and VR industry.
I love games in VR personally. One of my favorite things is that you can be social in VR and not be in the same room. So like I have friends in London I play walk 'em up mini golf with, and it's really great. And there are certain experiences that it's better to be social and play like that. Also, I do like just like a really immersive world, or doing something that sort of I dreamed of, like Space Pirate Trainer. I'm in like essentially a little shmup video game, shooting aliens, and I'm just the center of that. And it's amazing, and Walk 'em Out mini golf is fun because it's a metaphor everybody understands, so you can just play instantly, and it feels like real life, And their Racket Club is really cool too, Resolution Games, and I think that's really cool. And some things are really shocking, like a AR game called Spatial Apps that they've done. Is like you can basically play deathmatch in a room like this. And it puts walls in there amazingly, and you're actually physically playing deathmatch, and that's really cool. And there's a lot of potential. The cool thing is, And one of my regrets, I had this great idea for locomotion, and it was going to make this game called Tomb of Apes or something like that. And it was like, it was really natural locomotion. I could do this, and you could climb things like Ape Escape, and you could paddle boats, you know, like this. And I didn't make that. And then Gorilla Tag came out. It's like, oh, that was mine. But anyway, you know, it's not mine if I don't make it. It's in the thought space, right? As soon as you think of something, it's kind of, you're digesting a lot of the information that a lot of people are. So they're coming to the same conclusions of you, and it's who acts on that information. But regardless, I think VR is really fun. It just took a big hit because people don't like shit on their head. It's too heavy for most people. Also, people get sick. You know, they get motion sick. So, like, it's already cutting down. It's like two things chopping down your audience. So it's still kind of a niche industry. And I hope, you know, headsets get smaller. So, like, you know, the headsets are getting cooler and glasses are getting a little cooler too. And they're going to meet in the middle and finally have something Quest 3 like that you can just like quickly put on, and then it'll kind of take off again, I think. And I love VR games; they're really cool. But if you're making a VR game and you can kind of make a PC game as well, it might be a good idea just so you can massively increase your audience, and then say if you'd like the VIP version, like No Man's Sky, you know, hey, it's really cool to be in the cockpit, actually, you know, but you're not like investing all the company. Sort of eggs in one basket. So that's the tough thing. Is like, if it's really cool and it's only good in VR, stick there. Of course, you know that's the core. That's what you boiled it down to. But if it's something that you could share with everyone and make a cooler version of that, that's what I do.
Thanks.
Oh my gosh, you're gonna be running.
It's okay. I need a bit of exercise.
Okay.
So first of all, huge fan. Thank you for everything you've done for the industry. You're an absolute legend. And the actual question, so what kind of a game would you make if you had like unlimited resources?
Unlimited resources. If I had unlimited resources, I'd make a time machine and make Tomb of Apes. No. If I had unlimited resources, I would probably finish the Commander Keen series and the Anachronox story. And then I'd probably, well, I have an idea or something that I'd really like to make, which would take a lot of resources, but I want to make that thing and not announce it until I do. But it's something that would really be cool, and it would make sort of your whole life meaningful.
Thank you. Let's do last question if we have, and then keep everything else for tomorrow.
Oh.
Hi. So two small questions. Why the Harry Potter background? And on your previous slides, of course. Harry Potter's background?
Oh yeah, I had to come up with a dumb name for the speech, and it was like, it's dense fun. It's like, it's kind of my philosophy of dense fun. It's like happy player and the philosophy of dense fun. It was like just a punny title, yeah.
And the second question is, how do you deal with self-imposed expectations?
Yeah, that is a very deep question. Yeah, because like you want to be like, you're kind of holding yourself to a high standard, right? So just like, am I good enough? And like having a like a nice environment where people are supportive, like the university over here in their game program, that's a good space, because like everybody's trying something to create something, and they're all in the same space and they're all supportive of each other. And that's good. But if you're like not from that space, then there's a lot of self-judgment. You're kind of internalized a lot of like, you're not good enough messages. I found that Commander Keen was kind of healing my childhood, because I was picked on because I was a brainiac, you know, like, you're an egghead, you know, and everybody picks on you. But it's okay to be smart and nerdy and not, you know, introverted. It's okay to be that. And so I kind of made Commander Keen, I realized 10 years later, to heal that part and kind of like, you know, make that a good thing. That can be heroic to be smart and nerdy and all that thing. It was cool. So it kind of like healed that language a bit. But if I hadn't had that supportive thing, I'd recommend getting, in a room where there's smarter people and they're all supportive of creating and get those negative internal messages out and sort of stop that internal language like, I can't do it. You can. Like, basically, every creative person gets up and they say, what this, what that, and they just say, just make something. And if you don't make the most perfect thing, there's something new in the world you created that's really cool, and your voice is out there. And then the next one's going to be cooler. And you've learned that much, like you can't just instantly be, great at something. Like it takes, like 10,000 hours, as they say, to become a master at it. So like, start walking, and start doing it.